Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
It's 3 p.m. We're in the lower theater. There's a Zoom link on the agenda that can be found on the town website. That being said, I'd like to call this meeting to order. First order of business is to approve the minutes of March 15th. They're in your packet. Motion?
So moved. I'll second.
Motion's been made to and seconded to approve the minutes of March 15th. Although any further corrections, deletions, additions? Hearing none, seeing none, all those in favor would say aye. Aye. We are a little short-handed tonight. Sue is not here and Bonnie is not here, so there's just three of us amigos here tonight, so we'll try to entertain you best we can. Additions to the agenda for routine administrative matters and or pressing matters that will require ratification at a future meeting. I have none. Anyone else? Scott?
No.
Okay, public comment on items not on the agenda, 3 minutes per person. I don't see any persons in the audience. Anyone on TV or would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll move along to the manager report.
Thank you. I just want to give an update. We sent cemetery bids out earlier this winter and had them returned back in early March. Didn't get any submitted bids, so I called a bunch of vendors, people that had been doing projects either locally or were Walpole or other places to see if they were interested in bidding. Also talked to a couple of other people that were previously in the business to see if they would be willing to pick it up. Nobody apparently has enough staff to pick up any new business whatsoever. And so at this point, we've got two options left to us. The first option, I did talk to the previous bidder who had a contentious history with our cemetery sexton, and he is still potentially interested. He might submit something by the end of this week. The other option is we would have to go out and buy a 61-inch mower deck and bring our own crews in on a Friday and try to do it throughout the cleanup period in the summer and then through the fall, and use the contract money that we have in the budget to try to cover that with with that sort of an arrangement. So unfortunately, I'm afraid we're going to see more and more of this in this upcoming cycle here. We are having less and less capacity from bidders, and bidders that are coming to the table, as we talk about other bids tonight, you're going to see prices that are higher than anticipated or even what we had originally projected with some of the increases. So it's a little bit disconcerting about where we're headed with these things, but at least wanted to let the board know we're going to have to do something. Obviously, we can't let the cemeteries go through the whole summer, but it's less than ideal to try to bring it back in-house and deal with it.
Scott, how does that affect the workflow of the town crew if they have to cut cemeteries?
Well, they would have to do it on Fridays, and they're not regularly scheduled, so.
So it'd be overtime?
Well, we'd have to try to work out an arrangement, so they'd have to get paid a rate. I'm not so sure I'd pay them straight overtime, but we'd come up with an hourly rate.
Are they up for it?
A couple guys have said they'd be willing to do it, so before I've sat down with them and talked about it in any great detail. The riding mower and a trailer is probably close to 15 grand. When it's all said and done.
Would it have other use after if we had a
I
contract?
mean, you can always use a right, the mowers can be used at roadside and other places. I mean, there's always a use for it.
Yep.
If we're not doing it beyond this year, but at this point, it's something we're going to have to consider. We just don't have any other options. So,
Have we previously done it in-house?
I think it had gone through some cycles. I think at one point it was done with highway crews, and then it had gone out to contract, and it's been out for contract for a significant period of time. And what's happened over time is it's a very difficult contract because of all the weed whacking. So it's not a real, it's very time consuming for lawn maintenance guys, and quite frankly, they don't have the extra staff to commit to doing it. So that's really the problem. And so if you're trying to get people with limited capacity, and they're just not interested. So
Is Andy supportive of the idea of bringing it in now?
we talked about it. He'd be willing to, to support it. And, so really we only have two options left at this point. So everybody else I've spoken to, and I spoke to half a dozen local contractors and the people that take care of Walpole's and
Vermont hillside.
other places, and they just don't have capacity. So it's a challenge. It's going to be, I hope it's not a precursor of things to come, because, we have other bids, and I'm a little nervous about putting our heating oil out to bid with some of the prices. But at some point, we're not gonna have a choice. We're gonna have to do it. Yeah, I'm hoping that we'll see some relief before we have to go out and lock up our pricing for next year. So we just sort of beat the market a little bit this year. I don't think anybody's beating the market next year. I think the market's gonna beat us a little bit. So that's just wanted to at least give you the heads up to that, because it's been a point of concern. And like I said, I've talked to Ms. Potter about what we're going to do going forward. So we'll try to work together on this, but our options are fairly limited at this point.
One last question, Scott. If we were to buy the mower and the trailer, would we still be within our budget?
Yeah, I'd have to work the numbers so that we would make sure that we would be within the allocation for the contract. It's the only way that it could really work.
Okay.
So I think we can do that and keep it, to the number. So I gave, the vendor from last year had called me and had said that he would potentially bid, and I said, well, I need something from you by the end of this week, because I have to make decisions. Because all of the mowing equipment, quite frankly, they can't get any more inventory, so if we don't buy something within the next 2 weeks, they can't get anything. Most of these places had ordered a year ago 40 or 50 units, and they got 8 or 10 delivered, and they're not promised anymore. So the market is everywhere. You can just see where, supply chain. I'm not sure what other factors are involved, but be that as it may, it's impacting us. On something as mundane as mowing cemeteries. So more to come.
Okay, we have a lengthy liquor license application list here, so what I'd like to do is just, I'll read them off and then ask for someone to second the motion, and if there's any questions, we'll go from there, but next item on the agenda is a meeting of liquor commissioners, and we have Donovan's for an outside consumption, a first and third class license. Vermont Country Store is a second class license. Bard Energy on Route 103, second class license. Walgreens number 19233, a second class license. Outs Club of VF Inc., a first class license, third class license, outside consumption permit. Sandry 809 Rockingham Road, second class license. Leslie's Tavern, outside consumption permit, first class and third class license. American Legion Post 37, a first class and a third class, no outside consumption. BF Polish American Club number 1, first class, third class license. Athens Pizza House Inc., first class license. PK's Irish Pub, outside consumption, first class and third class permit. There you go. They're in your packet. If someone will second that motion, we can move these right along.
I'll second the motion.
Any questions, comments? Okay, motion remains second to approve the aforementioned liquor licenses. They're all renewals, no new ones in there. That being said, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. And we'll move on to the,
I had to create a whole second page for the agenda just because the liquor, all the liquor permits took the first full page, so apologize if it was a little confusing when you got your package.
okay, now, on page 2 of the agenda, first item is the Wyndham Regional Commission appointment. Sue and Bonnie have requested to be reappointed. So if someone wants to make the motion to that effect,
I move that Sue Hammond and Bonnie North be reappointed as our Wyndham Regional Commission representatives.
second.
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded to appoint Sue Hammond and Bonnie North to the Wyndham Regional Commission. So second time around, probably third or fourth for Sue, but nothing new for them. Any further comments? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor would say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Approve contract for bid award paving. Your packet?
So I guess there's a good news portion of this, and that was that we did receive decent competition amongst our paving companies. We did have one issue with one bidder who did not come forward as part of his proposal, where you have to give me a written copy. It's clear in our bid specification that at the time of the bid opening, I have to have a copy, actual written copy. I couldn't take it just from the internet. So unfortunately, he had only emailed me his bid. It was not sent with any kind of follow-up. And there were other parties at the opening, so at that point, that bid was not selected as in compliance with our bid specification. So we did get 3 bids that did meet our spec. The one contract that I would recommend for the paving is Springfield Paving. We have worked with them in the past. They're responsive, good to work with. Also, their pricing on asphalt was a little higher than what we had anticipated, but not catastrophically so. And in combination with the mill and pave, we're a little over budget in terms of, we had talked initially about an $850,000 total number, which you had put into your budget. We're slightly above that, but you have another item on your agenda, which is a structures grant for Class 2 paving. And in talking with our folks at DOT, we are eligible this cycle for that grant. So we feel fairly positive that we will receive that money. Just as an aside, Pleasant Valley Road had been paid previously, portions of it, and we had used some structures grant money back in 2019. We actually did receive $40,000 as part of that project. So there's a little history here. I had spoken with folks at V-Trans to make sure that we were, that there were any concerns about their process, if they were going to be able to hopefully meet our request. And at this point, they felt pretty comfortable about that. So with all that as a background, I think it's at this point recommended that we approve the Springfield paving bid as well as the All States construction bid for chip seal. That's traditionally been an issue where we don't get a lot of competition in chip seal. That seems to be almost a monopoly situation. No other companies really bid on that for some reason. They just don't, I guess they just don't want to invest in manpower and equipment. So they do paving, and for whatever reason, it's almost all of the chip seal work goes to Allstate. So with that being said, I think in combination, those 2 bids will complete the project that we have discussed for Pleasant Valley Road and keep us on cycle with our pavement management process that we had discussed way back in budget times, back to the fall.
Kind of just the green line on the map, the entire paving, including Shepherd Lane.
Yes, so I just wanted to show you that, right, there are some other small portions that are part of this bid as well. The vast majority is that Pleasant Valley stretch that runs roughly from 121 down to 103.
Shepherd Lane obviously wasn't done. We did Saxon's River last summer, didn't we?
Yes, it would have been. Right.
Yeah.
Summer of 20. Right, no, summer of 21, because this was summer of 22.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Altogether it comes to close to $1 million.
When you add the two of them together, it's roughly 960, roughly. So
And we had budgeted how much?
we had as a total project cost 850.
So that's 110 over what the budget.
Yeah.
And that money will come from.
The goal is to have that balance come from the structures grant.
Oh, okay.
For the repaving, which is also an agenda item for this agenda as well. So it's the next item.
Also included in that bid, there's a certification of compliance for town and road and bridge standards and network inventory.
We have to do that as part of the structures grant approval.
Okay.
So we have to, even though we've done it. when
Do
we
you
updated
have
it.
the actual contracts for the paving?
I don't have the attached contracts. I'll just use the bid specs and your approvals. If you turn it over, I can,
Okay.
I could just use the back portion of it, so. Because I have to put some additional contact information in there for Andy and a few other things.
For who needs to sign this? Do you need to?
Yeah, I can sign them.
Yeah.
Once I have your approval.
I know that on the other one, there's signatures all through this for
Right.
the annual financial plan and there,
Yeah, for the grant, there's a whole host of things I need you guys to sign.
okay. So we'll need a motion to award the paving contract to Springfield Paving for $594,530 and All States Construction for chip seal for $332,044.59. So someone wants to make that motion or second the one I just made.
I'll second what you just made, save some time.
And we'll authorize the manager to sign the appropriate documents. Give me a second. Okay. Any further questions, comments?
One question, Scott,
Yes.
Narrows Road has been pretty funky in the past year or two. I know it's dirt, but is there a drainage problem there, or where is it just a? You been down there? You know that road?
Not recently.
Yeah.
I'll ask Andy about it.
Okay.
'Cause I know he's been out working on some stuff already.
Yeah.
With the weather breaking, so. I'll check with him. Yeah.
Okay, item 4 is the Vermont Town Highway Structure Grant, which Scott just went through, so that's all been adopted, so we can move along and management's been authorized to sign the documentation. Let's move on to 5, appointments to Southern Windsor-Wyndham County Solid Waste Management District.
I guess, Peter, can we just jump back, if you could, just on that particular portion on the structures grant, the one thing that TA 60 form, which is one of the attached forms to there, that one I do need just the board to approve because I have to submit that we have basically it's just authorizing that we're spending so much on our existing roads. We're doing that with your.
The TA 61?
So it's that annual financial plan.
Yeah,
TA
you have
60.
a copy?
Yeah, so we can sign this one, would be great. And then the same for that road in road town, bridge standard, we've done it, I just need to do another copy to go with
Yep.
this.
Okay.
So if I can give you two guys this, then everything can go in our package for the district.
Yep. pass it right on to Scott.
That's great. I'll keep that out to them so we can get that process completed.
While we're talking about highways, did the FEMA money arrive yet?
No, we still are waiting on the first round of reimbursements, and we're still talking with them about some options for some of the mitigation monies. When we get into this discussion about the EWP, we'll talk a little bit about some of the issues along the railroad here which have come up, which have been complicating some of our conversations with them, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, appointments to the Southern Wyndham County's Solid Waste Management Program is a form in the packet. Appointing Larry White as manager and Scott Pickup as the alternate. Take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and authorize the select board chair to sign. On here.
Good, yes.
Okay, further discussion? Questions? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, adopt the local hazard mitigation plan. There is a abbreviated copy here in front of it because you all got the other 50-page one.
Right, I figured you didn't want the other 80 pages
No.
again, or the second time through, although I have a copy here if anybody wants it for their record. And since we last spoke, our regional folks have put it through some additional review, as well as public comment from other jurisdictions and FEMA and state emergency management folks, just making sure that it received a full vetting from all of the other potential jurisdictions that this plan ultimately might interface with. So it came back from them with their blessing to go ahead and then adopt. It's relatively important because this plan then helps us on our percentages for reimbursement. So we'll actually get a higher percentage of money from the disaster declarations because we've had this local hazard mitigation plan they've adopted. So you get another 7.5% on your.
I see this in the trustees and the secretary got to sign also.
You have to get it
Form,
through.
or you want to use one of these?
If you want to start one, we'll just start with one. So
Okay, sounds like a deal. Come on.
I have to put it through on the trustee.
Okay, I'll give those people a few minutes to sign that. Okay, moving along, we're going to approve, hopefully approve the USDA EWP grant agreement. That is for the chroma situation. Tank stabilization up there. There's information in your packet.
Yeah, so I brought down a copy of an updated stormwater area drainage map, and I got to give Gary and some of the folks who've been working on this a lot of credit, because anytime you get into stormwater, right, it's never a simple conversation. Everything gets more complicated as you dig into old drainage pipes, where water's sheet flowing, changes in climate change, problems that we've run into that were not anticipated because of new developments and new impervious surfaces. So at this point, what we're looking at, if you look at this large overlay map, and it kind of, it's a large drainage area. So the folks that we've been working with at Watershed Consulting broke it into sub-drainage areas, which is much more manageable for us to work with. And based on that, we're really looking at, in this particular instance, just some of the impacts that are sort of part of this Sonex, Whitney, Blake, Chroma area that sort of comes down that steep ravine and then ultimately sort of dead ends into into the Connecticut watershed. And part of the question here is it's multiple players. So as you can see, all of these impacts from the drainage across Route 5, some of the abutting properties that are actually on Route 5, as well as then down the hill. And there's some pretty steep elevation changes are impacted now by some of these storms. And they've started to see significant erosion around the back of the current Chroma property where they have a retention pond and where they had built on a pretty extensive renovation in the last, 5 years, Gary, I think that was done, the Chroma renovation. So Chroma has a pretty big investment in the community. We're obviously very interested in keeping their investment viable. They actually started they put in some seismographs and some other scientific instruments to measure the hillside because they actually started to see the hillside start to give away. And so after that July storm, they saw significant erosion after that storm. We did bring in folks from the USDA. They were able to come up with this EWP program, which will provide some storm hardening for very specific portions of the areas that are impacted around protecting their current detention pond, the back portion of their building, and hopefully with some additional drainage improvements, we'll be able to maybe then also alleviate some of the impacts of future storms. What we run into is every time that we've brought this group together, and now we've got 30 people practically on the Zoom call every time we have one of these conversations. We're finding a new challenge. There's a new set of roof drains that nobody had identified, which are now contributing to the flows. And we found that there are some drains that were from the mover property that are now a portion of the conversation. So all of that impacts that intake lane and the impact on the property. What the EWP grant that I'm asking you to accept this evening really does is at least keep that erosion from getting worse as we work on larger scale mitigation. That as we get into this project, we're finding is getting more and more involved. Just trying to get some understanding of all of the contributors. What are the volumes of water that are coming? What are the volumes that are coming with the additional storms? Because now we're seeing more and more of these heavy rain events and the impacts of those. And then ultimately, what can we do from a mitigation standpoint that will preserve the investments that we've had here? Because this is a pretty significant portion of our business community, as well as it impacts the railroad. There's drainage that run underneath the railroad tracks. During the July storm, they actually had another washout that was farther down, closer to the Spencer Drive area. And originally the railroad had worked with FEMA on that washout. And it turns out that after they did some of the work, they went back and researched some of the deeds, and they found out that the property that they had actually improved was not on railroad property, it was on private property. And that the town had an easement to the private property that we had maintained for drainage. So now we're going back and forth with FEMA about how's it going to get paid for, because it's not supposedly public property, it's an easement. We don't own it, we just have drainage. The improvements have already been made by the railroad. And when the railroad was told, well, now it's not eligible for FEMA, they'd spent, I don't know, $13,000 or $14,000. So they're looking for somebody to pay the contractors that they had that made the improvements for that drainage. So, and that's just one location, all up and down. They had about a 300-yard washout of material from that storm. But this entire area is impacted by all of these stormwater events. And what they're finding and talking with the railroad folks specifically is all of their drainage facilities are getting clogged with material. And so all of their, it's difficult, first of all, for them to go and inspect them. Because a lot of them have to do it from the water, they have to walk the tracks, and it's, it's very difficult to get there. when they finally do get to these, they're finding that they're packed with silt and rocks and debris. And kind of like the same issues that happen with our drainage up on High Hill, as the more and more of that ledge material gets loose and the more stormwater impacts that, more material comes down and clogs these pipes. It's creating more and more washout kind of conditions. So this whole area is going to be studied. We're very early in the process, but our goal here is to kind of come up with a comprehensive overview of what the impacts are, how we can possibly mitigate those, and then come up with some sort of plan to try to get some federal money and some other, because this will be a substantial investment to help it make improvements so that we're just not pushing the water problem from one side of Route 5 to the other side of Route 5, or pushing it farther down the hill and washing out the railroad, or, once you start chasing these problems, it becomes just a cascade of challenges. So the good news is all the folks that have been involved are working cooperatively. We're pursuing some other grants for additional engineering services to help us beyond what we've already started doing with the watershed consulting people, because we're going to need more specific site engineering to go through and do more analysis on outflow, outfalls, and other kinds of challenges. And these are tough areas to get to because a lot of them are steep ravines and they're in difficult areas to access. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge to get all that data put together and then ultimately come back with a plan, come up with a way to hopefully fund this plan. And then maybe even longer term, we've talked about the possibility of then looking at some sort of a stormwater district so that if we have to do ongoing maintenance, we can come up with a financing plan to help finance that as we go forward. So this won't just be a one-shot deal. We fix the drainage, everybody walks away and feels good, and in 5 years, all of your improvements have silted up and you have no visible impact for all the work that you've done. So it's a complicated problem. It's really important to us for our long-term economic health and the health of our community, because these are important businesses and important investments. It's, serves our industrial park, serves a lot of our currently established businesses, and it also has areas where we potentially see expansion or new business growth. So it's really important that this work gets done correctly and sort of in the long term supports this area so that it can continue to be a place that we can try to invest and build up our tax bases. And we look forward to the next phases of whatever economic development growth might be for our community. So it's a long-winded introduction to a very small USDA grant agreement, but I wanted to give you a picture of this because it's taking up more and more of Gary's time and my time and other folks, and we just wanted to give you a heads up as to some of the things that we're looking at, and then as this becomes more defined, we'll be back talking to you about next steps, which will probably be more grant applications and working with we've had Wyndham Regional has been very helpful with this. Some of our other partners have been very involved in this as well. So this won't be the last that you hear about this, but I certainly wanted to get your bring it to your attention because I think it's going to be an area of concentration as we move forward. So,
Scott, a couple of questions.
yes,
So this is Route 5 right down here, right?
yes,
Okay, and the railroad tracks are,
all the way down where it says unknown. That's really all railroad property.
Yeah.
Plus the Connecticut.
down here, yeah, right?
Yeah.
It's, yeah, this is 91 up here, is it?
If you look way up on the upper corner, there are
Yeah.
portions that you can see. Right.
Okay, and the drainage area 1, that pink shape, who owns that property? Town?
Some of that's town owned. Right. Some of it impacts some private properties. We didn't draw them contiguous to ownership. We drew it more contiguous towards elevations and how the water flows.
Yeah.
So
And sewage district with all the people who have properties here would participate in that? Would it be?
Well, the hope is that we can develop, like I said, a capital plan which will address the stormwater issues that we currently have, because a lot of the issues now are related to storms. Come up with a design that that will hopefully resolve those problems and then get some federal money to help us implement that. But the clean out and the long-term maintenance, that's going to be something that we would look at potentially the stormwater district for, so that we would have the ability to go in and suck out catch basins and clean out sump areas where you're going to get debris and other types of activities like that, so that the improvements that we make don't silt up and then become useless over time.
So the state passed the Water Protection Act, was it 3 years ago or something like that? That affects how many non-porous surfaces you can construct.
Well, this is not even part of that process to go back through stormwater permitting. This is just looking at the entire area in a more holistic approach and comprehensively, because each of the individual parcels will still have to get their stormwater permits, and there are requirements for them just based on their impervious and other surfaces.
Right.
But what we've seen is just because of the nature of the way storms are impacting us, the amount of erosion and the amount of, especially because we're hilly in Vermont, so the water wants to go down hills and to the lowest point as fast as it can. It's pretty powerful when these things really get ripping, and it generates a lot of destructive force. And then when it starts, you can see it. It starts to, you can see the hills sloughing and the trees coming down.
Wow.
It generates it's a real impact. So.
So, I guess a lot of these properties are probably grandfathered in with, drainage is not up to any kind of, anywhere near any modern day standard.
Some were done before the current permitting process. Most do have some sort of stormwater permitting. And as these come up for renewal, you're going to see more and more. They're going to have to be more retro work and more improvements in order to get permits. Especially if they have large amounts of impervious. That's going to be a big part of this whole process.
So a lot of people will be required to do upgrades. It's likely.
The way that the law is written, I think there's going to be more, I think that the property owners are going to be required to do more to try to lessen the impact of these impervious surfaces. So in some cases, they'll be able to do it on property, and in some other cases, they might have to do other modifications. It's really going to be a mix of those kind of improvements. Some of them might try green infrastructure, where they do rain gardens, or they do swales, and they do other types of things. So it's hard for me to tell you a hard and fast for each owner, but I can tell you that the attention that's going to be paid to this going forward is, I think, why a lot of these businesses are participating now, is because they can see these things as it progresses, and they want to be part of this conversation now, because it's not going to go away.
So what do you need? Just need the.
So the first thing I just need to do, and again, this is very preliminary, and it really addresses a very small portion of the bigger problem, is we do have a grant from the USDA. So the engineering work is going forward will be, we're at a point now where we want to get into specific engineering to do improvements to do bank stabilization, and lessen the impact specifically along that impact drive area. So what this will do is will give us the ability to do that. We have to go and ask the USDA to give us a project extension, so that we can get the construction within within the expiration dates, because these are typically are done for emergency events, so they have very short windows to get the work done. So we're pushing, we're gonna go to them to get an extension, but you'll start to see work potentially this fall to start that process. For at least that portion of the mitigation. And then as we get into budget next year, we'll be spending more time talking to you about what the next steps are in the watershed. So I'll be back probably with Watershed Consulting and Gary with a more comprehensive approach as to what we've discovered since we last talked about this and sort of the next phase of what we're going to do to start looking at the mitigation and what options might be available to us for support. So in this project, the federal portion is 224,000, roughly 225,000. And there is a local share, depending upon the size of the actual project. We'll use some of our funds to fund some of these improvements, but we don't have a contract yet, so I really don't know what our total cost will be. But they're projecting a total project cost of 292,646. So the feds will be in for about 225, and the local could be in for as much as 67,000. So we'll let you know as it progresses.
So we need to, you're saying that the town portion is gonna be 67,000?
If we spend the full 292, which we don't know at this point, Peter, because we haven't put the project into a 60% construction document yet, so I don't really have an estimate yet on bids. This is just a takeoff number.
Okay, we need a motion to approve the USDA agreement and authorize the manager to sign said document.
So moved.
Second.
Made second to approve the USDA document in regard to drainage issues up in the industrial park. And authorize the manager to sign the document. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor would say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, now we're down to resolutions for grants and funding for requests. We have two recreation trails program for 30,000 and a community funding request for the train station in the amount of $1.8 million.
Right, so I guess we'll do them in order. So the trails grant, and I attached just sort of a sketch of that next phase of the work. So it's really sort of the extension from the kiosk area down along past the sewage treatment plant, down, I guess, towards the Callister properties. So it will be that section there that you can sort of see extension of that existing trail. That's really what we're trying to do. So you can see the green dots, which is the existing, and then we'll be going from those green dots basically down towards where you see that private property. And that'll be the next phase of hopefully this project going forward.
So there was a grant that was, wasn't Peter Bergson involved in this project?
He's been, as part of this, the Conservation Commission has looked at this. So they were in support.
Was there a bid for $110,000? It was rather a grant application that was denied. Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, so that was the URSA grant a couple of months ago, and so this is the phases. So Scott provided a map that shows this first phase. So it's about a third of that $110,000.
Right.
All right, it was same vendor, the guy that's
But Peter obtained some other bids also that for lower cost to get this done within the grant amount, this phase.
Okay.
So basically, it goes around the wastewater treatment plant and ends where the fence, that's the southern fence of the wastewater treatment
Okay, and does the, do we have a easement through the McAllister land?
Yes. It's not us, it was written to the Historical Society, but it is for a trail. The easement qualifies for Department of Parks and
So it's a smaller bite of that same apple, but hopefully it'll create some additional. Every extension creates more interest and hopefully more use and more opportunity then to keep pushing as we go.
Yep. And would the town ever, the McAllister land has a pretty big tax bill hanging out over it. Is there any, would the town ever put that up for, kind of the tax down? It gives them like $28,000 in taxes.
It was put up a while ago and then, it's just, nothing ever returned, nobody bid on it. So it just sits there.
Okay, so the town, will it be put up again for tax sale this time?
I think it's on the list if I
Yeah.
remember
It
correctly.
probably is.
Okay.
Right.
So there's a recommended motion there, somebody wants to make it. And we can discuss the funding request unless no one has any questions for the 1.8 million for.
Excuse me. That's great.
Well, the only thing I noticed, about the one for the trail, there's a local match, but work that we've already done, covers a majority of that.
Right, we're not asking for additional money. We think that within some of the, again, Peter's reworked some of these numbers with some vendors and with some of our previous work, we think that we can get this done with just the amount that we're asking for in the project itself.
Motion to approve the filing, application of the recreational trails program grant for the continuation of the Saxons River Valley Trail from the north end wastewater treatment plant entrance, continuing for 590 feet, and agree to the 20% matching funds.
Here, a second.
I second.
Made a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. And the second is, there's no motion to approve anything. I guess it's just a,
It's more for informational purposes.
Just a grant.
This is going to, again, the congressional process for requests, they don't call them earmarks anymore, they call them community project funding requests because earmarks have a negative connotation, but they are the old traditional earmarks, which are specific appropriations in specific places for specific projects. So the congressman does have his current this round, so to speak, of request time is available. We put this particular request in because we do think it qualifies within our subcategories. So this economic development initiative is a federal program for which I think gives the congressional folks an opportunity to fund it within an existing appropriations vehicle, which they always prefer to do versus creating some special process or new process, which tends to be more difficult for them to approve. So basically what we're asking for is that is another portion of that funding stack. We've already started with our first phase of the project where we did get local approval. And we're working on the USDA portion, and this would be then a good chunk of the actual construction that would be part of the station renovation, the shed platform we talked about, bringing it back to historical standard, developing the inside so it could be potentially reused with a vendor of some sort. It has not been determined who or what that might be. So I know people are always saying to us, well, you're just doing it for a restaurant. I've always been consistent telling people that's an option, but not the only option. And certainly once the space is updated and renovated, then we can look at a host of options that might be available for that use. So I think people feel, there's still options within our space once we're that far along.
And do we close on the train station in July? Is that right?
That is the goal, is we've been working on the purchase and sale agreement. It's been going back and forth. As traditionally these things do, with tweaks of language and various things. It's not ready yet to come back for this board's approval. I'm hoping to have it sometime in May, that you can at least digest it and we can have it for approval. So
And at that point, maintenance for the structure comes to us.
once, if it's executed and right, we consummated the sale, then we'll become on. We'll be the owners. We'll let the owners do that. So it's part of this larger funding stack that, again, there's multiple pieces to the station itself. And we're still working through the timing of all these various different pieces because the Amtrak has a certain date, the ADA has a certain date. The Northern Borders, which is the NVRC, that's a separate process. So you'll be seeing us periodically coming back to you with these other pieces that ultimately, once you stack it all together, gets us close to that feasibility report number, which is about a $4 million renovation. So it's, another step along the way. This is more for your basic input and just information. It's really, there's no necessary action on the board's part this evening. When we're asking for that type of money, it's like the board to be aware. So if you have conversations with staff members or people in the community, so you have some understanding that we're in the process and very engaged and hopeful that maybe on this round we might be successful with being the owner. So
Thanks to you and Barry for all your work on this. Really, it's a big undertaking, has a tremendous value for the future. Thank you.
yeah, there's lots of moving pieces and parts to this. Gary does a great job of keeping it all up to date, and we schedule lots of Zoom calls, and you got to touch a lot of people. Yeah.
3 minutes of chess game.
Yeah, he's got this crazy chart on his wall that he's trying to figure out dates and what various grants are due when, and it's really, when you look at it, it looks like some sort of crazy person who's written stuff all over the place, but it's a roadmap to him that makes sense. So we just keep following along it, see where it goes.
So the $600,000 it says here, town taxes, general fund, small grants, capital campaign share, 600,000.
If everything, Peter, came in at those numbers, right, which is, again, these are all sort of working numbers. There is probably, our goal is to make that money disappear as we go through these various grant programs. So a lot of these numbers that you see here are just placeholder numbers. Right?
Yeah.
We're gonna meet with the Northern Borders folks this week and see, there might be more money involved in things, so you'll see that kind of go up and down.
It's gonna shift all over.
Right.
Okay.
So,
It seems like there's gotta be a certain amount of changes as the plans for the building are developed,
Yes.
those end numbers of what the project will actually cost.
it
Could come, could even come down.
that would be
Decide
lovely
to
to
do
come
some
down.
things differently.
I'll remember you said that.
It's a pretty
Construction
comprehensive.
costs are going, yeah.
It's, historic, and you guys know that, working on historic renovation, there's always unknowns whenever you're dealing with old buildings. And there's lots of compliance-related activity. Obviously, if we do a historic structure, we don't want to bastardize it or do anything to really ruin it to go forward. And so I think we're very sensitive to that, why sometimes these numbers look outrageous, because you have to build all those costs in. It's not as simple as a traditional renovation project. It's just more requirements.
ADA stuff will probably complicate things further.
ADA is always a challenge, especially in old buildings.
Yep.
Every old building was built with a step. Don't know why, but they all worked.
Exactly.
They were never built level, and they weren't built for people of today's width or height or, a wheelchair. They were all built with narrow halls. Bathrooms are built to be smaller. So there's challenges, but
I just think that it's at least all on one floor at least. That helps.
this building at least has some very positive pieces to it. You're right. It's not a multi-story structure. So that does help.
Okay, we all set with that one?
Well, that
Let's
was
go
that.
to number 9, the letter agreement for Rich Earth Institute.
So we've been kicking this project around since really almost a year and a half now. And last fall, Peter and I went to a open house, for lack of a better word, and just sort of went through some of their Rich Earth and hosted an open house. So you could see their laboratory and their facility and the things that they were doing and sort of some of their future ideas. And the goal for these facilities are to basically, they're just another form of recycling, for lack of a better word. And they put together a process that is not terribly invasive in terms of, like, food scraps. When you're dealing with food scraps, sometimes it can be smelly and it's kind of dirty and it's somewhat at times not pleasant. But their process, and Peter and I can attest to going to the laboratory, and they're handling larger volumes of this material and showing us some of their machinery and how it actually works. It's a very sanitary process. It's not a sloppy, messy kind of process. It's not like when you go to the grocery store and you're, recycling your cans and there's sticky stuff all over the floor and there's, bees, and it's an unpleasant experience. They have a pretty buttoned up process. And so they're really sort of at the next step here. We had met with some folks in Westminster just to sort of give them a heads up to say, hey, we're going to be making some changes to the facility. It won't necessarily impact what's going on, but just to sort of a heads up with them. They're going through some changes at Westminster, so I'm not sure. We might have to go back at some point just to touch base again, but at least for now, we've at least gone through the initial conversation. We're just basically modifying part of the existing building, so it's not a significant change on the site. So
we have to provide covered space for them.
they are building that as part of this. They're adding on to our building, so that's basically,
And they're paying for that?
oh yeah,
Yeah, that's one of the questions was, this has been held up because the guy
Yes.
emailed me and I told him, well, part of the hangup is, this is the town of Rockingham should provide the building. Well,
Right.
that's not but that's what it says in the letter.
Right.
So we finally got that straightened out. They are, but I noticed this thing has got a 5-year contract date to it.
the initial install.
I thought we had talked one time it was gonna be a trial basis for 6 months, and if it didn't pan out, then it would be removed and, or whatever, but.
I mean, again, if there's modifications that the board would like, if you'd like it subject to review after a certain period of time, we can certainly do that.
I mean, to me, if there's not enough, then also, where are the people supposed to get their 20-liter containers? Are
They handle all that outreach, and apparently they've been told people are already contacting them, trying to excited
Oh,
about it.
okay, it just says their own.
There's
stuff.
people that are very, kind of like you have early adopters on recycling and early adopters for composting. There's early adopters for urine as well.
Is Richard, is it privately funded? Who provides their funding?
They're not for profit. It's a conglomeration of funding. They do quite a bit of research. They have a lot of Long Island. They have a lot of Long Island Sound Clean Water Act money because a lot of their research is dealing with the watershed. Since the Connecticut ultimately runs in.
Yep.
So they they have a lot of grants and research and support from those types of organizations. Yeah, so they're looking at some of their designs, and Peter and I were there, they're looking to try to create, for example, portalets that when you go to a festival would recycle as well.
Kind of, the little toys they had were kind of interesting to look at. I don't wonder if you want to sit down on them or not. But,
This is like.
but they are also developing their own recycling system, the
Right.
separation system that you can buy yourself and do it at home. But it's kind of, they were kind of expensive, they said.
Yeah, they haven't been able to put it together to
Yeah,
make it
they're
really
still working on
affordable.
it. They had a couple samples down there.
Right.
Almost like one of those electrical things that you could buy that storage containers, you know, for storing electricity if you hooked onto a solar or something. It hung on your cell wall and stuff. It was, you know, it was interesting to walk through there, but
They're still doing a lot of that, and, you know, I think, to be real honest about it, the Europeans are much farther along in this than we are. We're sort of at the baby stages. They're well far into this. It's not unusual. It's just, it's, you know,
that being said, we need a motion to
yes.
have approve the letter of agreement and have the manager sign the document. Someone makes that motion.
I move that we approve the memo of understanding,
Yeah, you can just call it the letter agreement.
the letter agreement
Right.
presented by the town manager and authorize his moving forward with the project.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion been made seconded to approve the letter of agreement with Richard Institute and have the manager sign said document. Any further discussion? Questions? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor would say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. And finally, we're down to number 10, local cannabis control board discussion.
I just gave a little bit of history and just some of the background from VLCT on some of the, and again, a lot of this is new to the legislation, so it's somewhat being developed as we move forward, right? As more communities approve local option on cannabis. But the questions are, do you want to sort of go forward as you do with your liquor control? Do you want to go forward more as a land use type of process where you potentially use the DRB or planning commission? The process for cannabis is, I'm not sure, eventually it will be probably more like the liquor process, but I think in the beginning, it's going to be a little more challenging because it's going to be developing new process. It's really, at this point, it's hard for me to tell you how much work this might entail if the board decides that they want to be the local cannabis control. I don't know what that will entail. If you'll be spending substantial amounts of time with applications, there are timing and approval requirements, but I don't know how much of your time it would potentially start to take up as this thing, you know, moves forward. So.
Do you know, Rick, if they have a application form somewhere on VLCT sample form?
I haven't seen that yet.
Because that would be something we'd have to develop.
Right.
I mean, the state provides the liquor license things, and that's pretty well comprehensive. I mean, they spell it out pretty much on their form.
Sure do. I'm expecting that they will. I know that if we don't act, we lose any of the control permits.
Yeah, to a certain extent you do, because then, you know, it goes to planning and the BRB to, you know, they control the same as any other business, so.
Right.
But the other question I had too is that I thought I saw somewhere that we could, the town had the option to expand the operation area within 500, from 500 feet to 1,000. I thought that was mentioned at that
Buffer
forum
zone?
we had,
I didn't,
and I thought I saw that someplace in writing in one of the
yeah,
clerks from VLCT or.
I thought that was maybe the proposal. What I've seen is that if we make it any more difficult to open cannabis dispensaries and any other business.
True.
So maybe, I don't know how that would be interpreted, expanding from 500,000 feet. That would remove all of the downtown, a big chunk of the downtown.
Pretty much.
I talked to Chuck about this afternoon. And you saw what I sent you, what Chester did. I think that temporarily the select board acts until we decide to do something else, instead of putting a whole new board together. I would suggest that the select board become the cannabis control board. And then we use the DRB to advise us on applicants in terms of the land use issues.
That's what I was thinking on
Yeah.
same line.
That was,
Do it that way.
I thought that way we wouldn't be caught up in every single little piece of zoning difficulty that comes up, but we would be able to meet or hear about who the applicants are. The interesting thing about the liquor things that actually, you know a little bit about the person, like if you've been convicted of a felony.
Well, see, that's all in the application
Right,
process.
Right,
so-
that's all the
So
state. We
if
don't
they,
really
you know,
supply
somebody
any.
makes a mistake on that application, you know, it's their head on the block, so.
Right.
And it says all the same thing about VLCT, you know, it says the form from, about the cannabis, if it's, you know, you make a misstatement or, you know, try to falsify something, then that automatically could negate your permit.
Right, and here's, if a municipality has not formed a local control commission, no local license approval will be required before the board to Montpelier presumably approves a license to operate. So unless we do something, we have no say, right? That's what the Chester Select Board reasoned it through, and I think that makes sense. We're in unknown territory here.
I'm still confused about how different this is than the liquor control. I guess I don't quite understand.
Well, I guess the biggest challenge that I see, Elijah, is liquor control has a pretty established administrative process, right? So there's a whole, like Peter had said, there's a validation process for the licensee. There's a whole state review and enforcement process. There's a whole state application and local approval process. All of that's pretty well established and sort of settled law, so to speak. Cannabis is just starting that process. So it's my assumption is that eventually it will become pretty much the same process that you're doing for liquor control issues. It will just become a standard application, you work your way through it. But at the moment, as Rick pointed out, it's really not settled. So it's somewhat up in the air. We do have some authority, but how that gets reviewed by this board, and then there are, at this point, as Peter pointed out, there are no adopted processes really in place. Now, they haven't even settled yet on exactly what we could potentially charge an applicant for a fee, so it's still being hashed out, some of those basic administrative functions, but
There's also a tension that Chuck sees, at least I saw in our conversation, that we want to attract shoppers to downtown area. But we don't want them taking up every single every parking space and sort of overwhelming. In other places, down in Amherst, Massachusetts, they have or Northampton, they have a cop out there every day just to direct the cars. I don't think we'll be getting that kind of one. I know we won't, but still. And then it's, do we want to attract the shoppers? That's one of the reasons I think we want to approve this. But for parking and access, having it out of town, on Route 5 somewhere would be more less parking. Yes.
Yeah, true. But my opposition to this whole marijuana thing is, number one, is that the town doesn't get any funds, and now the state, the latest blurb I saw, that you could charge up to $100 for a license, but then the state's taking a cut of that too, so you're not gonna get full $100. So, and in my looking at this is that why would we want to use drugs to introduce shoppers to come to our area? I mean, that's, to me, it's a lousy way to, I would think we start looking at eating establishments or restaurants, because people come to town to look at a show or something, they're not gonna be running over there to get a joint and smoke a joint off the sidewalk or whatever. They'd rather go sit down someplace and have a decent meal someplace after the show, or perhaps before the show, and then go. So,
But if a liquor store opened up or a wine store opened up on Main Street, could we apply the same reason?
you probably could.
So, we have a state, the state liquor store down at the gas station. On the red light.
Yeah.
There. We'll go there, get a bottle of wine, walk out, and if they drink that wine in public, that's not legal, right? Public consumption.
Open bottle or.
Yeah, sure. The same thing is true.
In the village, yeah.
Cannabis has the same.
But there again, it's non-enforcement and
Right.
it's like anything else. There's abuses that are gonna abound no matter how you look at this stuff.
Right.
The liquor people come in, they do their little trick sales, send someone in underage to try and buy a cigarette or buy a pack of cigarettes or buy a bottle. And when they come back out, as the sales consummated, then they go in and it costs the person, that person loses their license to sell at that point.
Right, I think the same thing will happen.
But my concern is how often do you see that compared to the amount of accidents these underage kids are getting into and the deaths that are resulting from those accidents? We just had 3 or 4 of them, 2 or 3 of them last year.
Those kids were all drinking.
Yeah, and then again, Scott and I were talking about the parents that put on these parties and provide the liquor to anybody that comes. I mean, you see that everywhere you go. It's not just here, it's everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And it's, it's just amazing that people still do that. I mean, it's just, I don't know, maybe I have a different.
Okay, so here's another sentence. Here's from what you sent us, Scott. I went to the link. Even without a local cannabis control commission, a municipality may still regulate cannabis establishments in accordance with their general authority to regulate businesses.
Right.
Okay, so I mean, I'd like to move, I'd like to move with the select board for the near future, until we decide another plan, the select board be the cannabis control board. Make that motion. Further discussion.
Yeah. Because we'd have to figure out how we're gonna do the application process. I think we should have that ironed out before we, appoint ourselves as the commission.
You know that we're getting his telephone inquiries from prospective cannabis establishments. I haven't received anything formal from anyone, but I fielded a couple, and I don't know, Gary, have you received any inquiries from cannabis retailers?
Yes,
Yeah.
a couple of folks looking to rent some of the storefronts, some of the commercial spaces we have in town in order to open a cannabis retail.
So the local commission may also deny, suspend, or revoke a local control license if it violates conditions placed on the license. Local commissions must inform the board of such action. So if we don't have a commission place, the public sale happens in October, right? And the licensing is May. I think the license is going to start being issued sometime May or June. They'll have to do that to be able to open in October.
Right. I would assume that you'll have something coming here fairly soon.
Yeah, so if we don't have a, I mean, I'm just thinking that for the immediate, it's coming at us unless we have, we can decide, the select board can decide to move it somewhere else if we don't like that. But I think we should have something in place. I think that's what the Chester Select Board reason too. You gotta have something in place, or else you lose the ability to, revoke their license if they're not doing what they said they would.
Yeah, there's the violation aspect to that, if they violate even with the liquor at the Cannabis Control Board from the state, they can revoke the license.
But so can we if we have a commission.
We can also do it with other commissions.
How so?
Well, I suppose what I could do is ask Chuck to update, because we do have permits for business, right, when they apply for various businesses. And I suppose what I could ask him is if he could just put together a generic application that might apply for cannabis, and I'll bring it to you at your next meeting, and then you could sort of have that as part of the discussion about having a board, so at least you'd have something to physically,
Yeah,
right, sort of incorporate into the conversation. So I think we could probably do that and have that available to you for your next meeting. If you wanted to just continue this conversation, and we could have it on for your next meeting for
all right.
consideration.
I mean,
I, I feel like I would like to think about it a little more.
because it does say even without a local cannabis control commission, a municipality may still regulate cannabis establishments in accordance with their general authority to regulate businesses. The thing is that it does, if you form a commission, it says the local control commission requires a license. Now, that's where the hang up, or perhaps the impediment should show. A cannabis establishment, they have to obtain a local permit before they can apply for the state one.
Right, but if we
So
don't,
that's
if we don't have a cannabis control commission, then they don't have to do anything.
right. You don't have to do that.
And we lose, you know, the ability to manage it in some way. They can bypass us.
Well, I think maybe Scott's on to the right thing. We table this one now and bring it up either next meeting or it comes back to us with some sort of a,
Yeah, I'll do some work on the VLCT end, and I'll have Chuck do some work on our local
I mean, they made it
permitting and see if we can come up with
that
a,
now. But
Yeah, VLCT has a sample application that local
right,
commissions can use. That
right.
we can just do it the way we do the liquor license.
yeah, and then if we all agree that's what we want to use, and
Right.
we can do it then.
So, yeah, let's,
you know.
Yeah, we're 2 weeks doesn't really make it.
No,
a
No, we've
difference.
got, we've got probably a month
So-
or more to worry about it.
I have no objection to us being the board, but let's not, let's make sure we're going in the right direction before we jump into the pot and find out, oh,
Yeah,
we're in over our heads here. We've got too much going on. We don't need to deal with this at the same time.
Yeah, but not to decide is to decide.
So,
Eventually, you'll have an applicant of some sort.
Yep.
Whether we have it local or it goes to Montpelier, and my guess
Yeah.
is we'll see something.
so,
yeah, but we probably definitely should decide something soon, but just not right now.
right now, well, let's have Scott, see if we can find
I'll work
something
on some stuff.
somewhere
I'll bring some stuff
I
back
can't
to
believe PLC hasn't got some sort of a sample by now. They may still be there. They're sitting back waiting for the control board to make
I
the
think they've
rules.
been looking for some-
Stepping on,
you. Yeah,
Because I couldn't, I was just
That
Googling
could-
right now, and I
they
couldn't
could
find a
double up,
license.
that
Yeah, I
could
think
delay
Betsy had a question online, if you had a minute.
Oh, yeah.
Hi there.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah,
I just wanted to mention, I know there were 2 or 3 people at the public meetings that were interested in being on a local cannabis board as well. So I'm not sure how that would work if they join the select board or the select board starts and then, you get members to kind of fill your own seats but just wanted to make sure you remembered that there were, I believe at least 3 people said they were interested.
it does allow us to do that, to have public on there. It's just a matter of how big a commission do you want to go? I mean, but sometimes more is more unwieldy than less. Which is why, as Rick was saying, it should be a select board, because there's only the 5 of us generally. That's not saying that those people that are interested can't come and voice their opinions on an application, that being, if that's what you're trying to get across. But to have 8 or 10 people on a commission, I think it's going to get so unwieldy that, it could get lost in the transition, I think, somewhere.
And Betsy, we've got everyone, September 1st, 2022, license application of retailers can be accepted. So we've got time.
Yeah.
We've got time.
I mean, we can, when we get the full board back, I think maybe we should just poll. I know Bonnie mentioned that she agreed with the select board being the thing, but it could be a combination of 2 or 3 select board members and, a couple of public.
Yeah.
I don't think you'd want to go over 5, my opinion.
Thank you. I'm not interested. I just remembered there was a couple of people interested, just in case
Yeah.
the board had, concerns about being that role. So, thank you.
Okay. We're through the agenda pretty much, but Scott has mentioned that we may have a executive session for a real estate discussion. The board's willing to entertain it. We're almost done tonight and it's 7:20, so
I've
it
got
shouldn't
one,
take very long.
sorry, I don't know where this should go on the agenda, but I wanted to hear about where we are on the special meeting for the Australian ballot town meeting thing.
Well, we should probably go under the business at this point, but yeah.
Okay, whenever you think it's appropriate.
Okay, well, let's get down and see where we are. Review and approve orders, bills and warrants. We have them here in front of me. Somebody wants to make the motion to do that?
I move that we review orders, bills and warrants.
And approve, okay? Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion made and seconded to review and approve orders, bills and warrants. All those in favor would say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Coming around. Okay, agenda items for the April 19th meeting. If you want to put that executive session item on for that meeting, if we decide anything
Yeah.
on this tonight.
Yeah, we'll probably need to have
All
everybody
right,
here.
so why don't we just, we'll
We can
just
just
right in
hold
this
it.
real estate.
Yeah,
Do you have anything else that can we think of?
we'll have kind of
Finances.
this discussion, we'll have financials. Was something, what was it? Was it
Earmark for stormwater.
The earmark for stormwater? I thought there was a planning grant that we had to talk about at that meeting, or is that, maybe we already? I think we might be done with that one.
Yeah, Northern Borders letter of intent, but it's
Right.
not an application.
Okay.
Well, there's time between now and then for additions.
Okay.
Review the agenda items for joint board meeting, that's May 29th, I believe.
Yep.
I think the APA explanation will be coming out then, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So that'll be an update on where we are and where it's gonna go.
We do have the next public meeting coming up April 13th. and then
So,
we'll have-
right, April 13th, we'll decide that, and they'll look for everybody, the public portion will be over by then, and then we'll update after Cambion, goes through and filters out all the projects there, and as to how we're gonna do it. We have a pre-filter already that's gonna be going up for the 14th, the 13th of April.
All right, and we make the final decision.
The boards do, yes.
Oh, yeah, this is really guidance. I mean, this is really a chance for the public
Oh,
to get
yeah.
guidance and input, and ultimately, any appropriation decision of any type is up to the board, 100%.
The ARP meeting is taking place here at what time on the 13th?
I believe it was 5:30.
I think it was 5:30, I thought I
In
saw
this-
it
in this room, yeah.
in the
Yes.
thing there on the email I got today.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, other business. You wanted, go ahead. I don't have anything.
No, just the question of the shared ballot.
Yeah, I think we need to figure out whether we want to go ahead with one, or, and if that's the case, then we need to start figuring out when we can plan it. Now, the village has their budget, or the village meeting comes up in May. When does that start? We wouldn't want to run into that.
Yeah, I think the meeting, Peter, we might be doing the 10th, and I think the budget vote's like the 17th.
Okay.
So,
So we could maybe target date that, June, somewhere the first part of June. For that,
Whole meeting.
because it has to be, it can't be any more than 40, but not less than 30 days, you gotta put the warning out.
yeah, and you have a meeting scheduled June the 7th, which is the first Tuesday in June.
What's the first Monday in June?
First Monday, June is,
It's the first is actually a Wednesday. Yeah, so
Okay, so it'll be like the 5th maybe? Or 6th, is
if you're
it?
looking for a Monday,
Yeah,
that would be the 6th. And then you have the
Yeah,
regular scheduled
so-
select board meeting on
Yeah,
that Tuesday, the
that's right.
7th.
so if we wanted to schedule it for the 6th. Doesn't have to be June, I mean. 'Cause we need to get the wording of how we wanna, what do you wanna do, though? Everything, Australian Bell or just certain portions of it? From the floor and some from the, I think it's smart, if you're gonna do it one way, all the way, and don't try to mix things, because things, people are gonna get confused.
Financial stuff, everything would be voted on. Australian ballot.
That's what I was thinking, so then we just have to straighten out with the library, how they wanna run their warning article, whether they want just have it like it is now, where they propose a budget of X 500,000, then only 400,000 is funded by the town. You know, not necessarily quote specific numbers, but just to have the budget and have the town fund a certain a percentage or a certain amount of it. They have said that they're trying to keep it, you know, within reason, so. But sometimes if the carrot's out there, they may go for the whole ball of wax, and if you open it up to completely fund whatever they want, then you go all over the place with that thing. You don't know where you're gonna end up. So I think having that caveat of being able to control how much tax, you know, the select board wants to fund the library, and the rest of it, they'd have to, you know, as it is now, they'd have to, you know, come up with their own funding for the balance. This year was only like $12,000 difference they had to come up with, so.
Yeah, that was minimal.
Right, so.
So, there's a lot of opinion out there that you're gonna lose the winning town meeting ethos.
Yeah.
Back and forth and,
Oh, yeah,
like,
that's,
direct democracy and all that.
see, that's why if we were to maybe schedule it in, say, July and have the informational meeting in June, and that would give people a chance to get in. I mean, they can't tell us what they want to put in the budget. That's what we're elected.
Right.
So they can make suggestions of, you know, increase, decreasing, whatever, but eventually it's gonna, when we get together and start figuring out the budget in November, December, that's where you're gonna, the tire's gonna meet the road, so. But at least it'll give them the option to express their opinion. And it'd be similar to a town meeting, but they won't be able to amend any articles if you go Australian ballot.
Right.
It's solid or nothing, if the vote sit there for it dies, then you just have to hold another election, which is cost involved and the whole thing, which is why some people like to have the thing, but as we discussed at the meeting, at the last town meeting, is that 50 people make a decision for 5,000. So that's why there's 600 people voted, you know, Australian ballot.
It's true.
And unless there's really contentious items or issues that particular year, there's not a real big issue that comes out, and there's not a lot of people that come out of the woodwork to vote. I mean,
Yeah.
if you do it on the same time you're doing a national election of some sort, then you might get a lot of people, a lot of turnout, maybe 1,500 or something like that. But the average has been under 1,000. I've never seen it go over that except for national or presidential election or something like that.
The highway engineer salary vote a few years ago never happened before.
Yeah. Well, that was disputed, but then, you know, we cut it out, the select board cut it out of the budget, and they wanted to put it back in.
Mm-hmm.
So it was voted to put back in, but, you know, they couldn't tell us that that's where you're gonna put it. They can tell us they want to put $119,500 back in the budget, but they can't say, you go up and hire a new person. So we, you know, we could take the money and put it into a paving or something, you know, and not, but. So, or like, you know, somebody wants to slash some of the service funding for some godforsaken reason. I know it's starting to get up there, because I know we had it down around the 70,000 mark at one point. And now it's almost up to 100. I've seen it go as high as 120. So that's a lot of money when you're talking about, so. And we did try and cut it at one point by establishing a commission that they have to come and talk to
Make
the
their
people and make their pitch to that. And then we either deny or say, oh, you know, you want 5, we'll give you 3. So it's one of those
There was
things.
something where every so many years, people could vote on those individual agencies.
Goes up at 5, if I remember.
We did that once, that we spent about 30 of them, I think, like a 3-page warning, because they had, everybody voted in. That's why they switched to every so many, 5 years, I think you vote individual, and then the only other one that comes up is if someone is petitioning for more funding than they're getting currently. So. Okay,
Yep, good.
all right, we can discuss that further when the other 2 board members are here and get what their feelings are as far as the date goes. So, do you have any other business? Okay, shall we move into this executive session for about a 15-minute deal?
It's quick.
Okay. I move that the board enter executive session to discuss negotiating and securing real estate purchase or lease options pursuant to Title I, Section 313A, parentheses 2. That's all we need. So if someone wants to second that.
Second.
Okay, we are in the executive session. You want to
Give me a minute. So
close out?
we are not expected to come back into public session. We're not going to make any
No, there's no
decisions.
decision. No
So,
decision will be made. This is just a discussion.
correct. So thank you for the folks on Zoom. We'll be ending that portion of the meeting.